What's up guys, so today we're going to be making a CPM-3V test knife and doing some completely non-scientific testing with it. Now I originally had a different idea for this video, but I ended up having a memory card corrupt on me and lost some of the footage of me talking about 3V and its inherent problems when it comes to heat treating the stuff, as well as a lot of the other super steels. So I'm going to do another video talking about that, meaning the heat treating problems associated with 3V. In this video, I'm just going to tell you what I did to heat treat it rather than what I didn't do and why. Again, I'll save that for a later video. Also, if this is the first video you're seeing in this series, I'd urge you to go watch the first videos, which I'll link at the end of this video, and it may help explain some of the ideas I'm trying to achieve here with this knife. So with the blank cut out, we'll go ahead and drill out some lightning holes in the tang, as well as file all those holes out to make one large kind of epoxy fill area so that we can lighten the tang as much as possible. Now, this stuff is significantly harder to work with than 1084 or 01 in my experience. It was very hard to drill through and it was very hard to file. So the machinability of this stuff is definitely a little bit different than what I'm used to. So here we're just wrapping the blank in a special tool wrap. This is the high temperature rated version of this tool wrap. And all this tool wrap does is protect the steel from decarburization at the very high temperatures, which we'll be soaking the steel at before we quench it. Now I austenitized this steel at 2050 degrees and we plate quenched it between two 1-inch aluminum plates. Now, I don't have a great setup for plate quenching yet, so I'm just kind of doing it by hand. And typically what you'd want to do is take some compressed air and blow it between the two plates as you are plate quenching to help suck some of that heat out of there. But what I did notice was that these plates cooled this blank off extremely fast. This is a fairly thin piece of steel. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think that these plates actually suck the heat out of the steel quicker than oil does. That might be something I end up testing later on down the road. But one thing that I will mention is that I did not have my bevels ground yet before plate quenching. So this is a completely flat piece of steel. That way we can suck the heat out of the steel as quickly as possible without worrying about the plates not touching the ground bevels. So see how the foil kind of like sucked around the blade there? So we should have had a nice oxygen-free environment in there, hopefully. And hopefully it's relatively straight. It doesn't really matter for this testing. I'm going to get set up to where I have a much better plate quenching setup, but for now, this'll have to do. And we'll just do a quick file check here, and the blade hardened very well. Alright, we'll go ahead and put this in for our first 2-hour 1000 degree temper cycle. So like I said earlier, I austenitized at 2050 degrees and then did 3 2-hour temper cycles at 1000 degrees. Now I know there's different methods of heat treating 3V. This is just what Crucible recommends, so that's exactly what I did. And I'll talk more about this in a later video. So we finally got this thing heat treated. It took an awfully long time. It actually took, I think, around 9 hours. It's 3 2-hour temper cycles, and it took the oven about 2 hours to get up to the, I think, 2050 degrees that it took to quench this steel. And then like an hour cool down between each cycle. All that time adds up and all the other stuff. But anyway, took all day to temper a single knife. So now I can go ahead and do the finished grinds on this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them because I'm just going to destroy this thing. And we'll get a weigh in, and then we'll, I guess, head out and see what this is capable of. A quick shout out to White Bone Knives for supplying this awesome bevel jig. If you're in the market for a bevel jig, I'd highly recommend this one. It has a couple features on it which I think sets it apart from all the other bevel jigs on the market. I really like it. It's super fast to switch directions, and it's also super fast to change your angle on here, and it's fairly precise, believe it or not. Definitely recommend checking this out, because if you're using something like a piece of angle iron or whatever as your grinding jig, this is going to save you a ton of time. I'll do a full review on this coming up here soon, but for now, I definitely want to give a quick shout out to them because this thing is super, super awesome. Definitely go check it out if you're in the market for one. So I'm just going to grind a couple of really quick, really ugly bevels here with a ridiculously worn out belt that I probably should have thrown away a long time ago. But back to the grindability issue, this stuff is significantly harder to grind post-heat treatment than some of the other steels that I'm used to working with, like 01, 1084, 1095, that sort of thing. So keep that in mind if you are doing your grinding post-heat treatment, that it is going to be significantly harder to grind this stuff than your typical high-carbon steel. So now that our bevels are ground, we'll do a quick weigh-in with some mock-up scales that I made for another knife. These aren't the exact scales that I would be using for this knife. They're a little bit big, so our weights are going to be a little bit high. But we are coming in right around 3 ounces. So I think by the time we shape these scales and with epoxy and with maybe some later pin material, I'm not sure what exactly I'm going to be using yet. I think we'll be down around the 3 ounce mark, maybe slightly under. That is if we use a steel that is the same thickness as this knife, which is 93 thousandths. It doesn't have to be 3V, and at this point, I'm not 100% sure if I'll be using 3V in the future simply because of some of the heat treating issues associated with it, but we'll get to that in a later video. But anyway, right around the 3 ounce mark is what we're shooting for, and I think that's what we're going to get with this thickness of steel. So then I went on and sharpened it on a extra coarse DMT diamond, then a medium DMT diamond, and stropped on a 1/2 micron strop. And it wasn't absolutely hair whittling sharp, but it was pretty daggone sharp. And now we'll go ahead and do the 1-stick fire baton test. And, not surprisingly, it passed with flying colors. So right off the bat, edge retention seemed really good. I did a bunch of pathetic looking feather sticks on this piece of hardwood, and it's still easily shaved after, making a 1-stick fire and making a bunch of feather sticks and whatnot. I wouldn't have any problem saying that with the heat treatment I got on this particular blade that the edge retention would hold up over multiple days of outdoor use. So then we moved on to a much larger piece that's really outside of the range that this knife would ever be used for. And the grain of this wood was extremely twisted. It was very, very hard to get through this stuff. Even my axe, when I initially split this stuff, had trouble getting through this piece. So this piece of hardwood is no joke. And I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but the knife, as I got down to about halfway through, I ended up getting it stuck. And we have a really significant bend in the blade that I wasn't sure if it was going to come out or not once we ended up getting through this piece, but surprisingly it did, and the blade ended up remaining completely straight and true. So now it's time to move on to hammering the knife cross grain through a piece of wood. Now this is where the more basic failed after essentially the first hit. It broke into 2 pieces. And so far, right off the bat, this thing passed with flying colors. We even take it a step farther and go where no human could hold on to this thing and basically clamp it down to a piece of wood and all kinds of other stuff. And I had a lot of problems physically holding on to the blade in order to hit on it hard enough. This blade, you're not going to break this blade no matter what you do with a human hand. Even with C-clamps and all kinds of other clamping forces going on, I couldn't hold on to it. So now we'll go ahead and move on to another completely non-scientific test, which is the tip strength test. And just for comparison, here's the more basic tip versus the CPM-3V test blade tip. And you can see just how thin the CPM-3V test blade is. And we'll just go ahead and jam this thing into a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and see if we can break the tip off. So completely non-scientific. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm just jamming this into the plywood as hard as I can with my hand and then prying down on it and see whether or not I can break the tip. So it held up really well until I decided to use essentially my entire body weight to push the tip into the plywood, and then that's when it broke. And just for reference, the tip was about 1/4 inch into the plywood when it broke off. And then lastly, I took it out and cut up some really dirty plywood. This box had been kicking around the shop for a while now, and it has all kinds of like dirt and stuff embedded into it. So that probably plays a role in how the edge held up cutting through it. But I kind of lost count exactly how many cuts I made or linear feet worth of cardboard I cut, but I think it was somewhere around 70 to 80 linear feet before the knife stopped shaving. Now I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but like I was saying, the cardboard's extremely dirty, had all kinds of grit and stuff, and who knows what else embedded into it. So that it most definitely played a role in edge retention. Flying by the seat of my pants, it felt like it had really good edge retention, more so than a typical 1084 or 1095 or 01 steel blade usually has, but I really don't have anything else to compare it to other than those steels, or maybe the S110V pocket knife that I carry around most of the time, or ZDP 189. It's hard to tell with edge retention because there's just so many variables unless you have a really strict control over your testing medium and exactly what edge geometries on the knife and the heat treat. But like I was just saying, I think we do have fairly good edge retention with this particular heat treatment on this particular blade. It seemed fairly good. I think we need a direct comparison to something else before we totally call it and say it's the best ever or it's not much better or whatever. It's hard to tell sometimes flying by the seat of your pants. But anyway, it's a super tough steel. You're not going to break this just holding it in your hand. Passed all the tests of flying colors. We don't need to put this in the Blade Breaker 9000 to know that it would break in that. Because it would, but you're not going to break this just simply holding onto it with your hand. So it passed that test. The problem with 3V is that it's a lot of extra work to deal with. It's hard on your belts. It's hard on just about everything that you do. It's hard on your oven, and yeah, I think I like it, but is there that much benefit over like 1084 or 01? I don't know. I think we're going to have to do some edge retention testing to get somewhat of an idea. So with that being said, hopefully this video wasn't too boring. It's taken me like 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks to make this video. So hopefully it doesn't take that long to make the next one. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. So honestly, I think we've run into a problem when it comes to comparing steels, because everything I've tested so far has passed the seat of the pants baton test and nothing is broken yet, other than the more basic. So I'm not sure where to go from here, other than to just pick a steel that's easy to work with and go to town making whatever kind of knife I want. Looking at the steel specs, you'd think there'd be a bigger difference. What I will say is that the S7 steel blade did feel tougher. I can't put my finger on it, it just felt different. And sure, we're using different kinds of thicknesses of steel and whatnot, but for whatever reason, it felt like you could park a truck on it and it would just laugh at you. And I know that's not scientific whatsoever, but at this point, I'm not really sure that matters.